Thanks, Ankit. For the next segment, we move on to for the session on product security liabilities, product companies' own security vulnerabilities. For the panel, please allow me and help me to join the esteemed panelists for the session. We have Ms. Sivani, Director, Cybersecurity G Healthcare with us. We have Mr. Anil Sharma, Principal Product Security Engineer from Carrier. We have Mr. T.R. Ganesh, Chief General Manager, CISO, Grid Controller, India. We have Mr. Ketan Vyas, Delivery Governance, Risk Security from TCS. We also have Ms. Priyamvada Vember, Practice Head, Cybersecurity, Bosch Global Software Technologies, and she'll be moderating the session for today.
I can go to a consumer court and claim liability. So that's the essential idea of product liability, and it applies similarly so throughout the world. Now, if I were to imagine a microwave of future, where it has many dishes which it heats itself, it has robotics in it, it has AI in it, it learns by itself, it's connected to the internet, yeah? So there would be a whole host of different problems that would be associated with the microwave. So does the current product liability really cover those scenarios? That's the first question. And second, coming from the automotive industry, the modern car is now a thing in the Internet of Things. And in 2016, it was very well demonstrated that using the software, the electronics, the connectivity that the vehicle has today, you could ghost drive it. That is, you could drive it remote. So if a vehicle could be driven remote, it could also be driven to a tree, it could be driven to a wall. So this could cause injuries to the passengers, it could affect passenger safety. So clearly there's a case for product liability in this scenario. So what should the future legislations for product liability look like, and how should they be written out, and what would be the challenges in implementing those? So that's going to be the subject matter of this discussion. And with that, we have esteemed panelists here coming from various different industries in which all this digital transformation is happening, and they're going to bring out their cases, and we'll explore the subject from various angles. So let me begin with Anil. Do you have a case for product liability in your industry?
Yeah, sure. So, is it audible? Yeah. So, for an example, I'm like, say, I'll just consider this as a building where we have fire alarms, and all these fires panels are connected to at one location. So, for an example, if there's a fire catches here, so what happens is like the alarms gets alerted, and then accordingly all the fires alarms which are there will be connected, and they'll be sending a signal there's a fire around it. Suppose in this case there is a vulnerability existing in the product, and that because of that vulnerability, this particular one of the fire panel was not able to work, or somebody has able to control that. In that case, when manufacturer was providing the manual, he has clearly indicated that you have to configure in this particular scenario. But the consumer was as planned according to his network, and then he has defined all the segregations for the alarms and the fire panels. So now the problem is like, so from where the problem is coming? Is it coming from the consumer side, or is it coming from the product manufacturer? Because product manufacturer know there's a weakness, and he is giving a proper configuration setup. This is where you have to use in this way. So this is one of the scenario where we have seen that if there's something happens now, who will be liable on this?
Okay, so from your case, you say that there is a case for liability.
Yeah.
There could be the manufacturer at fault. It could also be the consumer at fault.
Yeah.
Okay, then we come to the next important industry, the healthcare industry. So Shivani here is going to talk to us about possibility of product liability in her domain.
Hi everyone, I'm Shivani from GE Healthcare. Healthcare is one of the most sensitive and critical device manufacturing organization which actually is built on the basic principle of patient safety. Whatever we do, our basic principle is the safety of the patient has to be maintained. But you would have seen issues where there are there are cases where while servicing an MRI, because it's a huge magnet, the service personnel uh, died. Uh, there was a case where a pacemaker was attacked. So of course there are issues, and it's a device. It can be used in a wrong way. It can have vulnerabilities. It can have other issues. But yes, it can go wrong, and liability does, uh, there has to be some, the responsibility has to be with someone as to who is liable. There are multiple actors there. There are supply chain, there is the manufacturer, there is a service provider, and then there is the person who is actually using the device. So multiple actors play different roles across, but yes, there is a case where the issue can happen.
Okay, so we have the modern health devices, the diagnostics devices connected. They could have software, they could be connected, and they have vulnerabilities in them. And there is a clear case for product liability in the healthcare industry. So then we move on to the next industry, which is the energy sector. And we have
Yeah. Good afternoon. I'm Ganesh, working as the Chief Information Security Officer of Southern Regional Load Dispatch Center, which is the power operation monitoring grid management center for the whole South India. We have regional offices. So this is directly 100% owned by Ministry of Power. We are the corporate arm of the ministry to implement all the regulations and to overall supervise that the grid is operated in a safe and secure manner. So to do this, we do have access to online data from all the important power stations, generating stations, renewable generating stations, more than 600 locations in South India. We have online data on our own dedicated fiber network. We get this. We don't use the public network. But still, when we look at the product liability, definitely since we are widely networked, like it is said that the strength of the chain is the strength of the weakest link. So since we are connected throughout the region, so any product which one of the constituents of the power system is using in their system, in their ICS or industrial control system or process control system or their SCADA system, substation automation system, if some component has a vulnerability which can be attributed to the flaw in the on the part of the supplier, then definitely he is liable, because if that can be exploited by somebody and it can be propagated through the network and it can reach the control center, it can create havoc. I mean, to the national economy itself, because the way we are monitoring minute to minute the system, if we don't have the visibility of the system, then the safety and the security of the grid will be at stake. So one thing is, when we talk about the product liability, it is not a straightforward case like a microwave or with respect to my sector I'm talking, or with respect to cybersecurity also. What happens is, cybersecurity and IT sector, these are all highly networked and highly automated. So what is happening is, when somebody sells a software, there is a supply chain involved in it. And what happens is, some of the components which he is buying, either using a freeware or he is buying the components and then he is integrating and supplying to somebody, then it becomes very difficult to identify that some of the component had a vulnerability and that supplier did not give in time that what all precautions he has to take while using his part of the software. So this becomes a very complex situation to pinpoint. The product liability can be attributable to the which component of that product which actually is the source of the vulnerability. So that becomes a very complex case, and the classic example is the solar winds. All of us know about it. I can take a couple of minutes in explaining that. The solar winds, all of you know, they have multiple products, and one of their products, network management system product, which was used widely in the US. Most of their federal establishments were using this. So one of their sub-vendors, Orion by name, that was hacked by a, I think, state actor mostly, they are telling. So that was hacked, and there was a patch which was due to be released. I think it was detected also very late, but some late 2019, there was a patch which was to be released in their latest version of their software, which had about 1,800 plus customers in US, most of them federal customers. So when the patch was about to be released, before that, that sub-vendors had to give a patch to SolarWinds to incorporate in their latest version of the software. So it was the sub-vendors system was hacked, and a malware was put in that. And then unknowingly, unsuspectingly, SolarWinds has updated this patch into their system and supplied it. All the customers have downloaded the new patch and updated their system. And to detect itself, it took many months, I mean 6 to 8 months or something. And it is an estimated loss cost to the US economy is more than $1 trillion. Although the total, they won't divulge the exact nature of whom they compensated, how they, what was the ransomware and all those things, because it was a state actor they are suspecting. But it was, that is the tune of that. And all these things could be due to one of the product manufacturer. He has a role not only at the time of supplying it, but throughout the life cycle of the product. He has to give the patch updates and test each patch for the vulnerability, and also caution the person who is using it in their software that what all precautions or testing he has to do. So this type of a legislation is not in place. After this incident, globally there has been a lot of initiative to bring in the product liability of cybersecurity products like it has been there in the other products and the normal consumer products. So with this, I hand over to Priyamvada for taking it forward.
Thanks for bringing out complexities in implementing this legislation. So now if we move on to Ketan, just to contrast these examples. So are there examples from a consumer perspective, from the financial sector, where we don't talk about physical harm, but we talk about material damages, financial loss for the end consumer? Yeah, and should that be a liability case?
So financial sector is highly regulated sector. There are sufficient laws in various geographies to take care of problems. So let's say if there is a fraudulent transaction, it is a problem. And if that transaction happens because bank's application is vulnerable, yes, there is a case for liability. But it is not a case of liability like what we heard from a healthcare sector, where a pacemaker is in body. And if it gets hacked and person dies, that liability is very different from what happens if a fraudulent transaction happens in bank. So there is surely a case for liability, but not in a sense the other critical industries are looking at it.
Okay, so with those examples with the background, let's look at the product liability loss and where is the entire global context really moving to. The European product liability, I'll not take the American loss because you could have different states having different legislation. So I choose Europe as an example. So the European product liability law provides for the definition of a safe product, what is really a safe product. And it gives out no fault liability. That is, I took an injection and I got a side effect as multiple sclerosis. I could still go to the court and claim liability. I don't have the burden of proof on me as a consumer. I need not establish it. And these two concepts are the general concepts behind the European product liability law, and the Indian Consumer Protection Act of 2019 carries this product liability concept forward. But with the changing scenario, that is with robotics, AI, ML coming in, connectivity coming in, and global supply networks being in place, Europe is rethinking its product liability law. And cybersecurity vulnerabilities are an area that Europe is clearly looking at. And there's a proposal on the table, which was tabled last year, September. It's called the Cyber Resilience Act, which intends to make cybersecurity vulnerabilities liable. And there's a big discussion around this today in the European context. So each of our panelists, let's take 1 minute each to bring out any additional challenges that we see. And from our point of view, is this too early? Is this too late? Is this doable? Is this not doable? Where do we want to be with regard to product line? Yeah, let's begin with you, Ketan. Yeah.
Sure. Surely it's a case. I think Europe has started. But there are few challenges, like in US, it is a private industry-driven innovations. So if you look at the products, most of the products are coming from private companies. If you look at China, it is a state-driven industry, where most of the product companies, government has a stake into that. And if you look at Europe, it is a end-user driven industry where privacy is first. So each geography will have its own challenges, and the liability by itself is very difficult subject. The courts need to decide based on the evidences that are presented to court, that are argued in court. So for each of the industry, each of the products, there should be a separate line of product security liability needs to be created. A more consulting needs to be done. There are few countries where executive orders are passed. However, so far, the laws related to this subject are yet to come, and more consultation is required. It is too early to say that it will come in few weeks. It will take years for consultation, coming up with draft, moving it around industry to take the feedback before it takes its right shape. So it's still a time, but I would say there is a need to move forward faster the way industry is changing. Thank you.
So in my view, as I earlier pointed out, bringing in a legislation, like we have the Consumer Protection Act 2019, there straightforward cases only can be handled by the judiciary. Because if a consumer buys one product and uses for himself, and then he suffers due to some defect in that particular product, then that can be pretty much covered. It is a straightforward case. But in the case of a cyber security product or an IT product, which is highly networked, what happens is, and I also said, presently we are not, it is not mandated to have a software SBOM, a software bill of material. In the hardware, what happens is, it is mandated to give a bill of material for the hardware, and each component can be priced, and it can be tested component-wise and inspected before it is accepted, it is qualified. So whereas in the case of software, we look at the performance of the module as a whole in the case of testing. Nobody so far, there is no law which mandates that he has to give a software BOM in which each of the components has to be tested before it is accepted by the end user or the integrator. And sometimes it is the integrator also who is supplying, who is buying many components and integrating. So unless these things are made tightened, it will be very difficult to pinpoint which product or which component caused that vulnerability, which ultimately caused some harm to the end user. And one more thing, important thing is, it is not just a product and the end user. In the case of a cyber product or an IT product, what happens is, it actually passes on through a network. The malware is propagated through a network of interconnected systems. And it might not affect all the systems, it might affect some systems, but its repercussions over the network may be very heavy. So to pinpoint that all those are attributable to the small vulnerability which is in the one of the components, it may not be exactly correct, because this could have been arrested in any of these systems by proper cybersecurity hygiene across the network. There will be an argument that this propagation could have been arrested, detected, or contained, or whatever. So since those things the legislation should be done in totality of not only for the product, but also for the conduit also through which it has passed through, whether all of them follow the cyber hygiene the way it was intended to or not. So all of them should be held responsible jointly or severally or whatever way. So this is one of the complexity in pinpointing that this particular vulnerability has caused this loss to the end user, and which can be of a exponential nature because of the network which is over which we are using these services or this thing. So it is not like a physical product. It is very complex. But the way forward till such legislation comes is that we should have some cyber security guidelines for each sector, depending on those sector, and all the people who are buying. And there is also a concept which has come up as a trusted vendor concept. Like the CCI is there in the globally. So once the CCI approved components are there, these are tested out before it is deployed in the market. So you can be, to a large extent, you can be sure that these are safe to be deployed in your network. But that said, during the product life cycle also, it is the liability of that particular supplier to do the patching in time and also to inform all his customers regarding any further vulnerabilities and give the patches out. So these can be contractually tied, that responsibilities till such legislation comes, and also regulations such as guidelines, cybersecurity guidelines, and this madam was talking about that cyber resilience. These things government is working on. Why they are working on this is once all the people involved are following this, then automatically the product vulnerability, even though it may exist, it can be contained at an early stage so that it doesn't cause a widespread damage throughout the connected network. Thank you.
Okay. Anil.
I'll take a very common example. Say for an example, I'm starting I have a small startup. Now I have to buy a lot of components, and I see that the cheaper components are available from China. And when I'm developing a product, I took all these component purchased from China, and I'm consuming in my product. Now, when I have taken all the hardware part or the firmware which is sitting on some of the components from China, my problem is I'm not aware what type of vulnerabilities they are having. So in that case, I don't have any options. If I go with other vendor, I have to pay a lot. And if I check for other vulnerability aspects for this component, it will be very tough. So I went to a China vendor and I asked him, okay, this is what the component I need. Have you performed any vulnerability scan, or do you have any vulnerability report for it? They said our cost of the component is just $1, and we don't want to invest $10 more on looking at the cyber part of it. So if it makes sense for you, we have done best from our side, and we want you to use this component, and later let us know on the cyber part. Now in this case, it's the product manufacturers now have to understand whether he should take the component from it, because they have no idea what this component is holding. And what I did is I built a product, and I have start providing this to the consumer. Now the problem is tomorrow a vulnerability comes into picture. Okay, I know I have not done a vulnerability checks on all of my components. I have done only some piece of which I am developing. Now tomorrow a vulnerability is there. In that case, then the consumer comes back and says, okay, there's a vulnerability and it can be exploited. We have internally identified. Do you have done a work internally? Then there's a question back to us from, I went back and I checked, there's no vulnerability in my component, but the component which I've taken from the supplier, it has that vulnerability. So in that case, you go back to the supplier and tell him this is what the vulnerability. He says, okay, give me 6 months time, I'll try to fix it. But do you have that 6 months timeline? Can you tell your customer that, okay, 6 months time, I'll fix it? That will not work out. So when you are looking for a product, you have to see from all the aspects. Tomorrow, if there's a vulnerability identified, who will be responsible and who will be accountable, and how quickly I can fix it.
The proposed vulnerability disclosure time in the CRA currently is 24 hours.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. We will come to you, the audience questions. Yeah, Shivani.
Yeah. So this is my personal opinion. I'm not talking on behalf of GE Healthcare here, but as a medical device manufacturer, as someone who is providing mm, solutions that will improve the lives of all of us, I can say that if we come up with these things like the product liability and that to associate it with cyber vulnerabilities and all in an industry which is already too much regulated. Each country has its own laws for healthcare industry and it is completely regulated. And as I was telling you before, the pillar of healthcare industry is patient safety, patient privacy, and data security. So if such tighter regulations come and if people feel that, okay, now the liability will be fixed on something, what I personally feel is it's going to dampen overall innovation in this sector, because you will start investing more on fixing the vulnerabilities which you might not otherwise do and which might be not as harmful as they now become because of all of this. So the innovation would definitely slow down. The second thing is my personal opinion that overall, whatever should reach the customer, the solution that should reach, would not reach, because the amount, the money, the energy would be spent on something which is not as important. Product security is all about how much risk you are ready to take, or what is the risk versus benefit analysis that you do. That is what product security is. There's no end to become secure, right? Security industry will keep on evolving. Vulnerabilities will keep on evolving. So when I, as a cybersecurity director, I kind of make decisions. The idea is, what is that risk that as an organization we can take? We have our own regulations that we have to meet to, the countries that we will be selling the products or whatever. So based on that risk-benefit analysis is what we decide on what we will be doing as an organization.
Yeah, that's a reasonable
Right.
expectation.
So now when this kind of regulation comes in as to now we'll have to fix. So I believe that this law has to be thought through very rigorously, consulted across industries to ensure, there is no doubt that accountability has to be fixed at some place. We cannot have people dying or going up or going through severe losses, even if it is 1 in 100 and nobody accountable for it. But then it has to be very clearly thought through as to how exactly are we going to define it. What is it that will be considered as severe? What is it that will be considered as okayish? And how exactly are we going to do? What would be the punishments and how is the penalties or whatever that thing is decided? So that it doesn't dampen the innovation in any sector. And the other thing is, it should not delay or it should not make the software industry work on something which is not important than working on something which is really important. There are things that are really required to improve the lives of people rather than fixing vulnerabilities. With the huge digital transformation that's happening after 2015, I can say, and post-COVID, it is like too much, where all of us want to get onto cloud. We want to provide the solutions faster. We want to have remote monitoring and all of that. Open source usage has increased, which brings its own challenges in terms of cybersecurity, right? Okay. So it's very, very important that these things are thought through very properly before they come in, and that's exactly why what my co-panelists are also saying.
Yeah, well taken.
Yeah. Otherwise, it will be very difficult. It would go and dampen the entire thing rather than bringing in the right solutions that they would want to get in. So that's my personal view.
Okay, so you've heard our panelists. There are various angles to the debate. There's nothing right or wrong at this point in time, but it's essential to put every view and every side of the story on the table at this point in time. Yeah, so with that, we open the discussion to the audience. We're willing to take questions. Yes. I'll get you the.
Yeah, product security liability context. See, so far in India, there are no legislations or regulations, laws, enforcing to ensure the product security liability in terms of data security. However, customer, say for example, I'm a small organization, product-based organization, my customer enforcing me through NDA, these are the security controls to be in place in my product, or the data which they are going to share with me. If I violate those controls or policies or acts, of course, there will be some liability clause as per the contract between the customer and myself. So by considering this, from the product security context, what are the top 3 vulnerabilities, are in place? I just wanted to know. Product security context, top 3 vulnerabilities.
What do you mean by top 3 vulnerabilities in place? I mean, top 3 vulnerabilities is already decided and those should not be there.
Based on the experience, or I'm a product developer. I develop my own product. See, I wanted to know what are the top 3 vulnerabilities I need to adhere with.
Okay, let me answer in this way. See, when we look at the top 3 vulnerabilities in the products now, one thing which I want to tell you, see, the products which I am developing might be an embedded product with no connectivity, a product with a connectivity, an IoT product, or a product which which is just made for, as I told, with very minimal connectivity. Now, when I'm saying top 3 get categorized according to it. If you can give me a little idea about is your product is connected to the, does it?
Say, for example, SaaS-based product I'm developing.
Okay. So,
Yeah, so if it is a SaaS-based product that you're developing, you should see the OWASP top 10 cybersecurity things that they publish every year. So you can see that they publish top 10, and that is the major ones that you should, as a developer, if you're asking, and if it's a SaaS, and which means it is connected, you should look into OWASP top 10.
Okay.
Okay, so
And that's a starting point, huh? When she mentioned OS top 10, it is a starting point.
Yeah, apart from that, like there is a concept of CVD.
So the question that you have asked is a very open-ended question, but I'll still try to answer that. So if you are developing a product and you want to say, what should I adhere to? So you never adhere to a vulnerability. You adhere to some standards that your product, as a manufacturer, based on your risk appetite and the business to which you are kind of supporting, you need to take a stand that this is what my thing is. If I go beyond this, if something goes back, I'm ready to pay the penalties. Now, that's your business risk. Because security you can overdo, you can underdo, whatever, but that's your thing. That's first thing that you have to be very clear. You don't adhere to any vulnerability. You adhere to those standards. So now your SaaS, what is that? Is it a medical device? Then there are certain standards where you are selling based on your geography, based on the land where you will be selling, based on the type of device that you are going to provide your software to. There are different laws. So you cannot say, I will not abide by those laws. Laws have to be abided by. Based on that is when you decide what is it that I have to do. Now you decide based on that. Once you decide that is when you know which all laws do I need to abide by. And then you go to OWASP. So OWASP is not the starting point. OWASP is somewhere in the middle. The first point is to understand your customer, where you are going to sell your product, and who is your, if you are SaaS, you are kind of B2B. So who is that other business and what are his customers?
So based on the user cases, I need to analyze,
and
right?
Yes, and how it can be used, misused, and all of that. So first you have to understand that entire thing. and then you decide on it. You never abide by any vulnerability. Vulnerabilities will keep on happening. It is an evolving thing. Today you solve all the vulnerabilities in your product. Tomorrow you come and do a scan, you will see another 10. So you will never be able to abide by that. So there's no top 3, top 10 in vulnerabilities. It is a type of attacks that are happening, and that is what OWASP tells you.
The point is, did you, according to the product that you're building, did you exercise due care and due diligence out of that? Is also this part which follows.
Yeah.
Right. Thanks.
Any other question from the audience?
Hello, yeah. My name is Suresh. I'm from a healthcare organization, so this question is for Shivani. So I did get your point that about product liability you mentioned, that moment you bring that in, it's going to be a problem for innovation. I understand that to a larger extent, but at the same time, when you look at it from a healthcare organization point of view, today with all these medical devices getting connected for monitoring purposes, as you said, as a security person, how do I allow that to be open for monitoring? And also at the same time protect my organization when the devices are probably not updated. So what is the, I'm not asking specifically about GE, I'm talking about what is the industry's, medical device industry stand in terms of ensuring periodic upgrades to the firmware as well as the software that is being used, rather than saying that, okay, this model is going to live with us.
Good question. I knew this question would come. So again, I'm not talking on behalf of GE Healthcare here. I'm talking as Shivani, who has worked in healthcare domain for 17 years now. So yeah, valid point. And healthcare, again, I'm saying, I didn't say that we should not be abiding by such laws. What I'm trying to tell you is, we already abide by a lot of laws today. Every country has its specific laws. On top of that, there are privacy laws that are coming in. On top of that, the end customer whom we serve to. And then in between the manufacturer and the end customer, there are these hospitals who have their own things that they have to abide by. And we abide by all of those, right? So when we are doing that, we are already doing a lot of things. Again, bringing in one more law, I'm just saying that we have to be very thoughtful. Otherwise, it's going to dampen the innovation. Now, coming to his point, how would it be like, are we going to fix the responsibility with them or not? Yes, today that's already happening. There is a very specific requirement for all the medical device manufacturers to provide patches on time. So if it is a cloud environment, the idea is that if it's a critical vulnerability, even if it is not impacting you, you will have to provide the patch within a week. And if it is not critical, then you get 15 days. And if it is not at all, it is okay-ish, you can still, if you have to provide the patch in 30 days. Similarly, for an on-prem device, like a CT, which is sitting inside the hospital, just connected to the hospital network, we still follow that if it's a critical vulnerability, we should provide the patch within 30 days. So there are laws which all of us do abide by, and we do provide the patches and all of that. But then you will have to understand, you might be having TVs which are 10 years old, and you cannot do anything to it, right? So similarly, in a medical industry, you can go ahead and upgrade the devices which are of lower cost. But then think of a CT or an MR which ranges in crores. And now if you ask the hospital to keep on upgrading and paying the price, or the manufacturer himself to be keeping on updating it, it's very difficult because not all hardwares, the old systems support that patching. So that is why medical industry as a whole is going through this transition where we are basically shifting to digital and cloud, so that the tie-up with the hardware is lesser, so that patching becomes very useful. Overall software development lifecycle is going through a huge shift where DevSecOps has become a major game changer for us, so that the deployment of the patches becomes easier. Overall testing and the security is shifted to the left. All that is going on, and it's not that the manufacturer is devoid of that responsibility. I'm just saying that bringing in any new legislation has to be very thoughtful and very clear, uh, and and consulted with all the industries in the right manner, because it will dampen the innovation when it is really needed at this point in time, when we are staring at new pandemics and all of that. That's the point.
I have
hope
a
I
counter
answered your
view on
question.
this. I would not agree that this should not happen. If we look at the medical industry, especially in US, the manufacturers are taking a different view than the consumer's view. So as a consumer, you want a good accountability coming in. As a manufacturer, you want to do a reasonable security at an affordable cost. But when it comes to a law, that means they will have to do it. There is a diabetic pump in someone's body or a pacemaker. You can't say that, no, there is a new vulnerability, but I can't patch it. You should have thought at the design level. That how am I going to design the product in such a way that I can patch it? Or you reduce the product life cycle. Don't say that this is a lifetime product, you don't need to worry about it, and then you say there is a vulnerability, I can't patch it because I have to spend so much money. So manufacturers are liable, and that's where entire world is moving. It is just a question of when, it is not a question of if.
Products.
So there are multiple guidelines in different countries.
Yeah, as
in
you said,
the US,
okay.
but still, in the US it is FDA. In Europe, Germany, Canada, they have their specific
In
guidelines.
India, any guidelines?
In India, the IT Act does talk about so many things about data privacy and all, which
Specifically for medical devices?
it doesn't talk specifically for medical devices, but IT Act talks about personal data and how.
Again, it's in general.
But they will bring in. So see, overall, when you talk about consumer protection and all, it does come into
As you
that
mentioned,
well.
like SLA to fix the patches 7 days and 30 days.
India
I was-
doesn't have that yet.
Okay, okay.
Okay, are there any further questions?
Hi,
Can
good
just
evening.
take a last one.
Yeah, good evening, Shivani.
Hi.
Just clearing the air around the finances which the medical industry has. It's one of the highest revenue generating industry in the world today, right? Correct? Do you think an industry which is earning crazy does not have the responsibility of making sure that products are secure?
Good question. Again, nowhere did I say that medical device manufacturing industry should not be held accountable. I repeat, nowhere am I saying we should not be held accountable. I'm just saying that we are already a closely regulated industry, multiple regulations across. Bringing in one more regulation, tightening it once more is only going to slow it down.
This is not tightening. This is
Okay,
not. This is a quality issue.
No,
It's all
okay,
across the board.
what I could perhaps say is one big shift that we all have to register with this is that until now, software was not liable. You could have bugs in the software, you could have defects in the software. It could just go to the field and harm anybody. It was never liable. So a big shift is coming with software bugs being accountable, and a subset of them are cybersecurity vulnerabilities. And this is going to happen anyway, maybe not this generation that long, but I'm sure we will all learn.
Yes.
We will also reduce the cost as we go by of doing due diligence and due care. But from my point of view, it's high time that we started looking at software as a product, and we also became accountable for the cybersecurity of it, because it really gives us that sort of convenience, and it should be safe and secure. This is my view on it. But clearly, the industry is going to learn. The essential thing is that we start putting those building blocks that are needed to get there in that time.
Yeah, and all the industries are doing it. I'm not sure why you got that feeling that healthcare is not taking that responsibility, but healthcare is doing that. And no, I do not want to argue, but the point is that there's no way healthcare industry is shying away from it. It is just that the environment in which healthcare industry operates is very different from the other industries, and that makes it inherently little more difficult for healthcare industry to provide the patches or or and the requirement of innovation, the need for doing the right things is much more on the healthcare industry. But yes, it is not shying away from cybersecurity. As I said, a huge shift is happening in the healthcare industry. DevSecOps has become one of the most important pillar in healthcare industry. And overall, you would see a lot of changes on the ground with the DPDA coming in India as well. It is in Europe and US, you would already know that it's a very stringently operated industry. I think the same controls would be coming in India as well.
Okay, so we are out of time, and thanks to the panel, and also thanks to the audience for a very interesting discussion. And I'm sure you will take it back with you, and you're going to mull over it and work towards making cybersecurity vulnerabilities liable. Thanks a lot.